to go?
Are we ready for live?
Yes, you got the live.
Better do that too, guys.
Understand.
I've got to put some here.
Oh, I'm not that. Excellent.
You can go ahead and get started. I'm assuming it's running, but I will verify.
Okay, very good. Call the Board of Supervisors work session to order. It's real quick, even though we don't have it on here. We have two things on the agenda, redistricting and then wilderness crossing. Are there any changes to that anybody have? If not, I would say that we can go ahead and adopt the agenda. Is there a-
Move to adopt.
Okay, second. And all in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. All right, first one is Mrs. Simpson and Jim Webb, redistricting.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we're bringing this item back from your regular meeting last Tuesday, during which time you all had provided Jim with guidance necessary to develop the proposed maps. Again, we need to have proposed boundaries for the voting districts as well as proposed boundaries for the precincts, and have the polling place locations identified in order to move forward with the public hearing process. So Jim took the guidance from last week and has the final draft of the district boundaries, the proposal for precinct boundaries, and some modifications to the polling place locations for your consideration this afternoon. And ultimately, what we'd like to have is a consensus on those two sets of boundaries and the polling place locations in order to have exhibits necessary for the public hearing advertised for October 26th. The other two items that were follow-up from last Tuesday's meeting, one of them was related to the town of Gordonsville. After your meeting last Tuesday, Ted did reach out to Debbie Kendall, the town manager, and she has responded that the town is supportive of being its own precinct with a polling place identified at town hall. So Jim has incorporated that into the current proposals. And then if the board is interested, I also have input from Donna Harpold on the accommodations or upgrades that would be necessary at the Mine Run polling location.
So we're definitely interested.
Okay, so Donna indicates that there's only two paved spots that are marked for handicap parking at the time. The rest of the parking lot is grassy. It's gravel, but at best it's grassy and hard to tell where to park. She said on election day it's especially difficult to see the handicap parking spots if you don't know that they're there. So she thought paving more of the parking area would be necessary. She indicates that there's two doors to access Mine Run. One is a door to the bingo hall, which is a standard size door, which she thought she could live with. However, some improvements need to be made at the threshold at that door to make it more readily accessible. And the door that goes, there's a sidewalk that goes around to what she's calling a back door that leads into the kitchen versus the bingo hall. She said that door is even smaller than the bingo hall door. So a larger door would have to be installed if that entrance were to be used, as well as improvements at the threshold to accommodate wheelchairs and that sort of thing. But those were really the only two improvements that she could identify. And she did visit Mine Run this weekend and took some photographs and that sort of thing.
Okay,
Is there the requirement to have both of those entrances or just one of them?
No, from my understanding, it's just one of them.
Okay.
And they're currently using the door to the bingo hall.
Now, there are two doors there. There's a
Okay,
very small vestibule with an exterior and an interior door. If we're going to do something there, I would recommend that we enlarge both of those to a 3.0 door.
Are those on the side there toward the side road, is that?
Yes, do you see that?
Right there.
Right there,
Yeah,
that's where it's at.
Yeah. And is that the two paved parking spaces?
Yes,
Yes.
right directly in
That's
front
all
of
the
it.
pavement there is, yeah.
But widen those to the, to 3.0 doors and do whatever groundwork needs to be done for those thresholds so that they're handicapped accessible. And
And is that something that the county
I think we have
will
to do that
have to, well, we have to get permission, obviously,
from them.
Yeah.
But as
Since
far
it's
as,
our money, I can't imagine.
yeah, and then as far as the handicap spaces, I'd recommend that 2 appropriate handicap signs be installed. If that's done, those spaces are,
Well, you could put in temporary handicap signs, couldn't you?
but yeah, by the time we do that, I think it's probably gonna be damn near as cheap to put in a permanent sign.
You mean like a sign on a post, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's up high enough that people can see it, because whenever they use that for any of the public facilities, they need those handicap spaces. And if we're going to continue using it as polling place, just do that.
Two is, I guess the other question would be, is 2 enough in our judgment, or does that meet whatever the requirement is, having the 2?
so her request, didn't mention additional handicap parking spots, just additional paved parking or improvements to the parking in general, but not necessarily additional handicap spaces.
That's a big lot, as you can see.
And I was going to say, I think we'd be much more well-served to have some gravel delivered there and get that parking area, parking lot delineated more than anything else.
Okay.
I would not recommend any additional asphalt.
How many potential voters are you seeing there anyway?
Probably,
A couple hundred?
you probably get
What was that?
Yeah, it's anywhere
6 to 8.
Yeah, well, in a non-presidential year, it's 4 to 5, and presidential year, it's 6 to 8.
But it could be, that could change some now.
Yeah, like I was just looking, it's, what is it, 3,300 registered, or,
Currently, is that double doors there, or 32-inch?
no, it's
Just one second.
it's sort of,
It's a vestibule with
Yeah,
one
no,
entrance door and then another door,
Not double doors.
not double doors. And that would be problematic to go to a double door there. And
What are
that-
they, what on earth are they? Are they 2.5-foot doors? Is that what they are?
32-inch, I think.
probably 32, at least the inside one is 32.
Yeah, I
The
think the
outside,
outside one's
might be.
smaller.
yeah, it might be smaller, that's
Yeah.
right.
Um,
They're a long time.
Yeah, they have, so that would at least be my suggestion on it. Any other thoughts?
Well, you certainly know the building and it's Jim's district, so whatever you all think is good by me, I think we need to go ahead.
Actually, yeah, my voters vote there, but it's in
Yeah,
his district
right.
currently.
Our
The building's in
district, exactly.
I'm looking ahead.
So, but that would be my
Thanks,
recommendation.
I appreciate that.
To the next census, huh?
Well, no, it's gonna be in Mr. White's district,
Oh, okay, yeah.
And
Right.
as soon as this new plan
As
is
soon as this
approved.
plan gets approved.
I'm going to say you're probably looking at 2 to 3 loads of gravel in there to make it, so it lasts. And,
Yeah, and it's probably gonna have to be some fairly small gravel, some 7/8. I don't think you wanna put 57s or anything like that in there, because that's really hard to walk on.
it's very possible that just, I know the crush and run may be the,
Yeah, it could be.
but,
Get somebody to pack it.
yeah, definitely, we just need to check with Chief Madanka.
Okay. would you like me to, contact Chief
Medanza.
Do you
Mendoza?
want to contact him, you want Allison to?
I can call him.
Okay.
That's not a problem. I just want to make sure we got a consensus.
But we will need, I guess, something in writing from them, giving us permission
Yes.
to do that.
And then, and
And a cost
a
estimate?
budget
would
of some
be-
kind, right?
Okay.
$50.
Okay. We'll see how much
Perfect,
gravel
well.
we can get.
That's right.
Okay, so, that satisfies, we're okay with keeping Mine Run as a polling place location, and Chairman Crozier, you'll reach out to Chief Mendoza, and we'll do what we can on our end to get a cost estimate together, just to pass along.
Very good.
And, Mark, you're okay with last week's plan to have Town of Gordonsville as its own precinct, and have Town Hall as the
Right,
polling location?
and Jim, I just want to make absolutely certain that the, otherwise, the precinct boundary lines are the same, is that correct?
They are, other than the addition of these folks from your alternative.
Right, there's addition there, but the line itself between the two.
Correct.
So, out of curiosity, what is that? Is it what, 3244 in the west?
Yep, 3244 in the west.
2515 in the east?
Mhm.
Correct.
1409 in town, okay.
Verify.
So,
District 3 will upset it.
And I think you said that for District 5, that the precinct boundaries are the same as they were before, except for that outside area.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The one,
Yeah, so that'll stay the same.
mhm.
two, we did move, the precincts have moved rather significantly. We lost area in the west and then moved east.
Yeah, yes, sir. Originally it was 522, and then last week's meeting, we moved it down to Tower Road
And Tatum.
in Tatum.
That actually is an easier access up to Lightfoot than it would have been going to Mine Run. So their commute to the polling place is actually shorter. Time-wise, definitely shorter.
And then,
District 3, the town of Orange is one precinct, everyone that's not in town is the second precinct. District 5 didn't change,
just real quick, where are they going to be voting at?
Prospect Heights Middle School for the town precinct and Unionville Elementary for the east precinct. District 4, Mr. Crozier, we had talked to you about using Route 3 as the precinct dividing line.
Right.
We did capture the one part of the 50 and over community in that east precinct. But we're concerned that there's not that census block doesn't really appear to follow anything there. And it's only 50 folks right now in that census block. So wanted to get kind of the last housekeeping thing to clear up would be if you
What's
want
that
to-
next to it? It looks like it's open space.
It does, it backs up to Lake of the Woods,
How many are in that census tract?
just 50 right now.
No, I'm sorry.
This larger.
That was that
larger.
long skinny one that we were describing, that has close to 500
Okay.
in that one.
So it's,
My only concern about moving the small census tract into the other district is that is under construction.
Mhm.
And I believe that's going to be phase 1 of that development, which you're going to gain probably 2 to 250 in that census tract.
So you'd rather leave
Keep
Route
them-
3?
I'd rather keep them in the east. It's going to be a number of years before the second, third, and fourth phase of that's done.
So you want to keep it like it's showing on the screen?
I would like to keep it the way it is on the screen.
But then we have a problem with meets and bounds, is that what you're saying, Allison?
So it appears from what Jim and I were looking at,
Must
we
be a
can't,
creek there.
There is a USGS waterway listed there on, their data, so that technically could be used. I'm not sure if it has a name or not, but that's how the census block is currently split.
The Twin Lake
Mhm.
is absolutely there, and it's just on the other side,
Mhm.
and that stream feeds it.
And the census block runs right through that
That's-
lake.
Yeah, and these are how these two census blocks are split, is through that waterway that's still
Mhm.
included.
I would like to keep it that way.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, if we
It,
get Patrick Maloney to figure out a way to do it. It seems like maybe we could, if it's not named, we could name it.
Right.
If it actually is a physical delineation there.
there is, unless somebody's
Call
got away
it, we
with
could
it.
call it the Crozier Ravine.
We'll pass on that one. There was already a request for another name of Crozier in there.
There was a hole with your name on it, but I don't think it was.
Yes, there was.
okay, so we will send it to Patrick to try to keep it the way it is, and we'll let you know if there's any
Tell them
concerns.
we'll pull our basket if not.
Dig a trench.
All right, so we're,
And the polling places there are going to be the
Wilderness Shores Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, and then rather than the middle school, the
Locust Grove Primary.
primary,
Mhm.
right? Because that actually is more serviceable for the residents there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so we're not proposing any changes to polling places other than the addition of town hall for the new precinct in Gordonsville, and then moving the Locust Grove Middle School to Wilderness Shores Clubhouse, and the other one in your district will remain the same.
And I believe Donna working to work out all the details with the clubhouse group over there, the people.
Yes, so we have on our action items to initiate the process of memorandums of understanding with all of the polling place locations.
So all of the Lake of the Woods people who are in your district are now gonna go down to the primary school
Yes,
instead of the middle school.
the only way to avoid that would be to take that long skinny census tract.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. So that is inside Lake of the Woods as well. Okay, yeah, and that's fine. It's,
Okay,
What we were trying
I
to
get
do,
blame it on you.
I get complaints either way, either way. I want to vote with my friends, I don't want to vote with those outsiders. It's closer to go to the school.
I took all the grief when they went into your district at the last census.
Yeah, that is fine, Allison,
okay,
that works. We have more important things to do for our citizens than one day every year or two.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem. I'll make a point of letting people know though in my article, just to say.
Very good.
so I think we're good with the district boundaries, precinct boundaries, and polling locations.
I confirmed with the Lake of the Woods board that they're okay with the existing polling places in Lake of the Woods.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir?
Just a comment, back to a concern I had a follow-up conversation with someone that brought this back up, so I'll mention it. I know we're doing this, and I know we need to do it now, and I know we're talking about it, and I know there's gonna be public hearings, but there's also an election in November that this has nothing to do with.
Absolutely.
So we have to keep that in mind, that we're careful to say to everyone that this is a 2022 phenomena, has nothing to do with the rest of this year, election or not.
And if we need to, I can go back and relabel the exhibit, so it says 2022 instead of 2020.
Whatever, I just,
Or draft,
Or
or,
put an effective
Sure.
date
yeah.
or something on
Sure.
it.
I've got a complaint already from someone who's having to drive to a different place, when in fact, they're not, so it's just the world we live in. Too much information.
I think it's a good idea, Jim, to take that, because of the 2020, you're referring to the census.
The census data.
But it's, yeah, so that could confuse some folks, so I think that'd probably I would endorse that idea.
And for the present time, label it as draft as well.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, sure, but, yeah.
We need a formal vote on that then?
No.
Okay.
And even the coverage in the Orange Review this week, which I haven't actually read all of because my paper was stolen, but.
While you were reading it?
No, it never came.
Probably by Hummingbird.
But I did go online and read it, and there was actually a few things in that that were a little bit confusing. So, just.
So you,
So in 2
Good to
years,
go.
Jim, you will not be living in your district.
I will not be living in my district come November 3rd. Technically, or not, whenever,
This takes place in 2022, correct?
yes, when it takes place.
he'll spend 4 years out of his district.
Well, it'll take effect as soon as we get,
Somebody
as
else.
soon as we take, as soon as it's approved, it will take effect, but it won't have an effect until November, unless there's a special election.
Yeah, it would actually not affect. I'm gonna stop.
Its impact won't be until a year from this coming November.
That's right.
Correct.
Try to say that to somebody.
And for anybody that is watching this on the live stream, I've checked with the county attorney as well as other people. That is 100% legal, acceptable.
Well, that hurts my feelings, you check to go with other people.
I was gonna bring that up.
Just wanted to acknowledge it.
That's exactly right. I checked with Eric first. All right, thank you very much, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, now, we will move on to the next one that I would like to frame how this is going to move forward.
You need a big frame.
I'm very.
Yeah,
It's a sturdy one.
Yes, yes. I would like for Mr. Gillespie to go through his memo. And at that point, we will go for discussion, and Mr. Gillespie will be here for questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mrs. Bradley. I do have a couple additional exhibits, and I just want to remind you that we have all the PDF documents of the master plan and all the other information available. So if you want to look at things in some detail, we can do that. But Mr. Crozier's request in terms of going through the most recent memo, I'll do that. So the planning commission and the staff are seeking guidance from the board on a number of policy matters related to the Trevino Wilderness Area Plan and the application made by this applicant for the current rezone RZ 21-2 Wilderness Crossing. So this is an attempt to get some updates related to the plan that was adopted 2013-15 after a period of great involvement by a number of people who are still here, as well as those that are not here anymore. And of course, just a reminder that the District 5 Planning Commission representative recently changed. And so Mr. Frame, in the midst of beginning this application process and going through review in town hall, we have a new member as well. So he in particular is looking at some of the items that he wasn't involved in shaping, and making sure that the policies that are adopted by the board and the wilderness area plan are applied through this rezoning application. Or if there's a need to update the Durant Wilderness Area Plan, that now's the time to identify where those opportunities exist. All right, in the memo, I started off with some background about what the application is. You all know it's 20 parcels, totaling 2,600, 18.5 acres. It includes a mix of current zoning districts. The majority of it is agricultural. However, we have about 180 acres of general industrial I-2 properties, some limited industrial district properties, and general commercial properties. And the proposal And the proposal is to change all of these for the district that was established about 3 years ago to implement the Germanna, one of the districts, to implement the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan, which is a planned development mixed-use district, PDM. These properties are located in sub-area 4, Wilderness Run, and they comprise about 2/3, a little more than 2/3 of the entire sub-area. Some other areas in the sub-area include dam inundation areas downstream of the Lake of the Woods impoundment. This has gone through 2 application review committee meetings as well as an applicant-led town hall in which we had representation from members of the board as well as members of the planning commission. Mr. Hutchison, District 5, did a handoff to the new commissioner, Mr. Nickel, who Mr. Frame had suggested be nominated, I think a week or 2 before that. So Mr. Nickel kind of stepped in June, and has been getting up to speed in July, August. So just a reminder, the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan was adopted 2015. It follows the planning effort focusing on the county's primary development area, which is the Germanna Wilderness Area. The board's strategic vision for the county continued to be expressed today, follows, and I would say echoes in many ways, some of the values that are in the plan, which are to be deliberate, public, transparent, and reflective of the desires and needs of the county for the Germanna Wilderness Area. They highlighted a particular vision statement, and so I will read that now, because I think it's worth reading. And this is in the adopted plan. A place to live, work, and play with a higher standard of design and development, which is a self-contained, complete community that is appealing to current and prospective residents, and is a place clearly differentiated from other places. It will be a dynamic destination that results in an economic engine for the entire county. Four key considerations that the plan hinged on: promoting connectivity, providing ample conservation areas and open space; 3, setting standards and expectations for attractive and harmonious development; and 4, encouraging and supporting economic growth and development. So those are the 4 key considerations. All of the additional information in the plan comes from that vision as articulated in those 4 values or considerations. I identified the implementation milestones that were included in the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan, and those are on page 2, the list of items A through F, the Transportation Master Plan. And again, we're looking at the time period from 2015 to current. We do not have a Transportation Master Plan for the Germanna Wilderness Area. An Infrastructure Master Plan, do not have that. Historic Cultural Resources Master Plan, do not have that. However, the board was pretty quick out of the gate to establish new zoning ordinance districts by amending the zoning ordinance. And again, those are to implement the vision and those 4 key considerations for interconnectivity through economic growth and development, for planned development business, planned development mixed use, and planned development traditional design. There were also subdivision ordinance amendments in 2018, but through 2019, some of these include some development standards which repeat some of the development standards for the zoning districts, but also have some layout and design standards that are consistent with the plan that the board had adopted fairly recently at the time for Germanna Wilderness Area. And then lastly, this is not a select list, this is the complete list. I'm reading through all of them to not omit anything and fail to be complete. Is the implementation of an economic development and branding strategy, and I would say that that's ongoing. So, pages 2 through the beginning of 3, pull out those sections related to the policy statements and the desired future conditions and the various areas for land use, transportation, infrastructure, and other areas in the GWAP for sub-area 4. And I've left checkboxes open when, in staff's opinion, the proposal is either not expected to fulfill this condition, or it's unclear how the condition will be fulfilled. And I should have said the vision is a 50-year vision, so it's very hard to implement things on a 5-10-year basis with a 50-year horizon. So unclear does not mean that it cannot be done, it just means it's unclear how that will be implemented or fulfilled. And then those that are checked are those that we feel the application at this point makes pretty clear that they would fulfill the condition. In the plan, there are policy statements to shape future conditions by sub-area that generally follow the laundry list of hoped for future conditions. I have reversed that order for the purposes of this memo because I think it helps to have the policy stated up front and then the select individual items. So I've reversed the way it is in the plan. I will not read all of these because, unless you want me to, I think these, okay, so these are somewhat long. There are 5 for land use, and it basically talks about, good, smart, wise land use, using good techniques, utilizing the corridor on Route 3 to limit access points on the corridor to guide development, to recognize that a new roadway within the transportation area is planned, to coordinate future development with adequate public facilities and services, to ensure that the properties are, the term here is appropriately allocated among a mix of uses, but essentially that the uses themselves are complementary and it's not exclusively one or the other. In the one area of the county we have planned for, most especially planned for an intense multi-use, mixed-use development. So in the land uses and zoning future conditions for housing, we have clustered residential along with open space. I've left this box open because staff's opinion that the residential development along the environmentally constrained areas that are designated for open space are not consistently clustered, and that is a matter of art and some subjective opinion, and we can discuss that more. And it varies in type along the ridges, slopes, and streams. And really what we see in the transportation network is a fair number of disconnected segments which don't fulfill the highest vision of what a cluster development can be. Mixed-use development in conjunction with commercial uses via planned development. So what we have here are mixed-density housing types, detached and attached, that are separated and in some cases distant. And the distance may not be very far in physical distance, but may have barriers. For example, tree stands or parkways, divided access parkway, restricted access parkways that are in between the residential areas and the mixed use or the commercial areas. So we see that there are opportunities to improve that, but that there's a disconnect, both in physical separation, but also sometimes distant because of the barriers. Multifamily residential is checked. There's absolutely multifamily residential shown in the plan. At the bottom of page 3, so for commercial, a blend of innovative commercial development approaches within planned developments cited in a manner along the future transportation corridor preservation area to include intensive planned commercial, a town center, and planned mixed use. Again, this is the town center core of the plan. However, there's an area along Goodwin Drive, and we can illustrate these from the exhibits, where it appears the out parcels are more typically representative or characteristic of the out parcels like you see at the bank outside of the food line. So it's an auto-oriented edge for an area that otherwise is pedestrian-oriented, or hopefully includes a lot of pedestrian facilities and would be pedestrian-oriented. The next is a question. So the goal, the future condition desires expanded retail goods and services, and professional services, medical, et cetera, across from the main entrance for Lake of the Woods on the north side of Virginia Highway, Route 3, along Goodwin Drive, and its future expansion in a traditional commercial development that adheres to the vision for the sub-area. So this is left open because it really is a question. Do the retail goods and services and the professional services along Goodwin Drive and its future expansion in a traditional commercial development adhere to the vision for the sub-area? So does the creation of strip centers consistent with what's there at the edge of the town center area adhere to the vision of goods and services within reach of people, whether that's from the main entrance from Virginia Highway, but also from the mixed use area to the east.
You're talking about the area that's not part of this wilderness crossing plan, but the existing commercial area.
Is correct, at the connection point. So it'd be the extension of that. Would you like me to bring that up on the screen?
No, I just want to make sure that I knew which area you were talking about. It's not part of this plan.
This.
Well, it exists today. Is
Well,
that
it's the extension of where it will connect to where it exists today.
But it's not part of the rezoning request.
It is.
The strip centers are,
Well, yes, sir, it's shown as out parcels and strip centers.
Well, okay, I mean, we need to clarify it, I mean, I'm looking at page 6 of this thing, and it's, what I think is the area you're talking about is outside the boundary shown. Just so you know, that we're on the same, we're talking about the same area.
Yes, sir. So this is Goodwin Drive. And the food line. The bank out parcels.
But see that red line, that in my book, that red line is defined as the boundary.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So that is the boundary of the rezoning case. So this is looking very close in on what is a detailed master plan that at a zoning stage, we have really before the board, what will be coming before the board, what is currently before the planning commission is both a conceptual level plan and in this case, a detailed level plan. In this detailed level plan, these are out parcels, as you can see, that typify out parcels along Route 3.
Yeah, we're all confused, I think.
I'm having a problem when we talk about this thing as an entirely mixed-use area. And it looks to me like you've got some mixed use down here, and then you got a whole bunch of residential, which is really not within pedestrian distance, which is what the mixed use calls for these areas to here.
Yeah, it's a bit, I mean, you're talking about 4 square miles of land.
right, and that makes it difficult, but when we go, okay.
Can we get this straight? Josh, on this map here, there's, on one side it says industrial development, the other side it says commercial industrial development.
Mr. Johnson, they both say commercial /
I'm sorry, okay, you had it blocked off.
Yeah, I did,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So the one that your cursor is closest to, that's in the development, correct?
Yes, sir, these are both in the.
Both of them are. The area that I thought he was describing, which is further, that area which exists today where there's a food line.
Okay, well, it's a little confusing because it's within the red lines, there's kind of red lines all over the place there.
Yeah.
And so I was having a hard time understanding what you all were asking. So all of that is within all of that says commercial industrial development is in the existing plan,
Correct,
in
proposed.
the wilderness crossing plan.
Correct. So what we see here is, again, from staff's opinion, we're looking for guidance, the planning commission looking for guidance is for the key consideration of interconnectivity and the ability for people to have both mixed density in terms of numbers, and mixed types, as well as the ability to get around those 4 square miles. Is in the area closest to the town center, the general planning concept is people will endure about a 15-minute walk, which is generally about a quarter mile.
Okay, let me just ask one question here. Lake of the Woods is roughly the same area. Is Lake of the Woods walkable to the clubhouse? Okay. Walkable has to be put into a reasonable category of distance within an entire.
Didn't you just say it was 15 minutes was the standard?
That's the standard, yes, sir.
And how long would it be from the farthest reaches of Lake of the Woods to the clubhouse? If you walk
3/4 an hour?
45 minutes? Okay.
Easily, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're jumping around a little bit. I mean, I agree with Lee's point. Mixed use, I thought was supposed to be sort of mixing this all in, so it'd be kind of an old, the way towns used to be done. And that's not what we've got here. What we've got here, it basically is another Lake of the Woods, and I, for once, don't mean that pejoratively, Lee. But, you know, Lake of the Woods is a housing development, and then all along the road, which I realized was separate from Lake of the Woods, but it grew up into commercial.
No, it is still part of
It's still a part of it. Although.
Well, some of it is, not, certainly not all of it.
No, everything on the southern side of Route 3.
Okay, so what we're really talking about here, this is nothing different than what's already there, so I don't know why we needed a GWAP to do it.
So, Mr. Johnson, if I may,
No, the chairman's back, it's up there.
So we see the opportunity in this particular area of the rezoning and of the future project for there to be street level amenities that allow that 15-minute walk from maybe Food Line may not get all the way there. But what we see here is a large parking field and a building setback at a distance from the road. So this is essentially a big box store. So this is not taking advantage of its potential proximity to the town center. So we're asking for some guidance on that. Where does the interconnectivity go? Again, standard planning rule of thumb would be a 15-minute walk, quarter mile. Recognizing that topography, streams may prevent that. You may have natural barriers that make it difficult. It may take you 15 minutes to go, literally around a street, depending on how your connections are.
Well, we've aggravated that whole instance of pedestrian by plunking that thing all along Route 3.
Which is what we had worked on, quite honestly, for all that time, was to concentrate along that parkway.
Along the parkway, not Route 3.
Okay, well.
Well, I'd like to shift gears.
Absolutely.
We need to, in order to make progress, I think the board needs to spend some time talking about our concerns, our priorities, things that we want to see. And I think one of the things that we should talk about is, let's take a topic like transportation, since we're talking about that, is that all through the planning of the GWAP and in the plan itself, it says, focus away from Route 3, get away from Route 3, take the traffic away from Route 3, take the development away from Route 3. So I think we should make a strong statement that says we want to protect the viewshed of Route 3, that the parkway has to be the primary traffic component of the local traffic, certainly within the development. And there are some pieces of that show up that are beginning that. Not sure it's quite complete enough. I think we want to say, the planning sort of assume the traffic light would have to exist where the post office is. That would have to become a signalized intersection. But that's it, no others, no other traffic lights.
One of the things that I'm not sure they understood is they ran that new rerouted 20 to cross into the.
Well, and that's the other thing. I think I'm prepared to say the intersection at 3 and 20 is not part of this discussion, period.
Well, and I don't think I think maybe they didn't know that there is a right of way through that parcel that was transferred to the state historical department. There, before they transferred it, I worked with the Walmart lawyers to get a right of way through there, so that they could go straight across 20 where it lies now, going past the 7-Eleven and the bank and on into a parkway.
What is the width of it?
Which would be the Gold Mine Parkway, correct?
Huh?
Would be the extension of
Yeah.
the gold.
Yeah, instead of trying to bring it down where they've got it labeled down, because that's an expensive operation. Plus, it puts a lot closer to Lake of the Woods there, and so we specifically worked on that with the Walmart lawyers, not the Walmart lawyers, the lawyers that were working their rezoning or their special use permit.
But the intersection itself, the 3 and 20 intersection, is outside the scope of this. It has really nothing to do with this.
Well, it does if you're going to have a parkway, and the parkway's got to hit 3 somewhere.
But it doesn't move the intersection. But there was some discussion about, or some question actually about, well, does this plan have to include the relocation of the 3 and 20?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And I think that's sort of a position that we need to take and say, someday that's got to be dealt with, but that's really a discussion about VDOT and lots of money and smart scale.
Yeah.
And that should be one of the items.
They do have another alternative to run the Gold Mine Parkway.
But I mean, I think that what you're saying, Lee, is the Parkway shouldn't come out on 3 where they've got it, it should come out down farther.
It should go where 20
Yeah.
currently crosses 3.
Rather drastically would change the look of how they've got things set up.
Sure.
But you would move it west to come out in front of Gold Mine.
No, I would,
Go
Route
east.
20.
I would move it, I would move the Parkway further to the east so it connects with the existing Route 20.
I think there was some discussion about that and the transportation planners were not recommending adding more activity at the 3 and 20 intersection. That's why it's where it is.
Well, if you put it there, then,
I'm not a transportation planner, so I don't know,
well,
but I think that was the concern, that you've got a failing intersection, so let's add to it and make it double failing.
Can I just maybe add something to that? I mean, I'm a big proponent of roundabouts, and I've seen some huge ones. And I'm not so uncertain that we could not put a roundabout where 20 dumps into 3 at the same time you connect that back with Gold Mine Parkway.
If you could ever convince VDOT of such a thing.
And I think they're coming around more online, but let me finish this. I would think that would really be a nice aspect to bring to Orange County for the tourism, and we could use it also as something that would
Entrance to the
reflect
county.
more with the battlefield versus a bunch of traffic lights and overpasses and things like that. Now, I've seen roundabouts that can convene 2 4-lane highways and other roads, so it can be done. And I don't think we're talking a whole lot of extra room to do it either. And I think VDOT, we might have to push a little bit, but I would think it would reflect well as far as the gateway into Orange County. It would dress it up a little bit. And instead of turning your 4-lane highways into temporarily parking lots every time you have a signal.
well, if you're throwing if you're putting that gold mine, tying it into 3 where it is now, you're gonna have to have a stoplight there. And you're gonna still have the one at you're still gonna have the one at the existing 20, which is just, blocking up Route 3.
Well, I mean, what happens with 3 and 20 going forward is, it has to be a VDOT conversation. We've tried to get smart scale money 2 years in a row unsuccessfully, and ranked very poorly.
Even with smart scale, it was going to be one phase.
Well, the problem is that they talked about doing something like a roundabout and there was an issue of the available land there. That was why there was some discussion of moving it further to the west where there was some land available. But I just think that's the part of the conversation that we need to have, and we need to press VDOT because it's an issue even after with the improvements that they've made. But I don't know how you put it inside this project other than defining where the parkway intersects.
Well, it seems to me this is such a massive project that we don't want to approve the project and say, well, we're gonna let Route 3 and these entrances kind of take care of themselves later on.
I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that it seems we have to do it all at one. We want to plan this all at one time here. And frankly, I like Keith's idea of a roundabout, and I wonder if there isn't some possibility of getting some political weight behind it from the Battlefield folks. We all got a letter from the Battlefield folks back here a few days ago. If you can get our Congress representative person on board with it, you can suddenly start accessing some funds that you couldn't otherwise. But this seems, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not even halfway to being an expert, but we've got all these kind of catch-22s here where if we do this, then that has a run-on effect farther down Route 3. And
I was talking to Alan Saunders the other day, was not in the format that allowed them to make any kind of a recommendation. They didn't get any database to deal with it. At least that's what he was saying. And we really, before we buy off on this thing, we need to have some sort of a recommendation out of VDOT. Whether it's, I mean, they don't have a thumbs up or thumbs down, but they certainly ought to have a recommendation that we need to consider as we approve whatever that happens here.
Mr. Frame, I would like to say part of the materials that were submitted with the traffic impact analysis include, or assessment include the data, interoperation data for those traffic movements, which is a proprietary program that runs. I know we received it, they may not have, they may be looking for something else, but
I don't know, I'm just telling what Anna told me, that they're not ready to give us a recommendation on the transportation. And frankly, I'd certainly want to see that before we buy into anything. Maybe they will, maybe they can be pushed to give us something.
I'm just looking at that intersection in our GIS. The problem is that almost the entire southern side of 3 is battlefield. Right to the right of way. Actually, it's not a right of way, it's a special use permit, not a right of way at all. And that's been sort of the dilemma that going all the way back to the Gateway study, 80 years and days, if you remember. There's, I mean, I don't know if you can see that, but see the light green?
Yeah.
That's battlefield, and that's 3.
Except for that, those parcels that bisect that King and family owns. So they actually have a route down there, so that's.
Yeah.
Not like you need to get the park's permission on it.
No, there is a strip of privately owned
That's
land
right.
through there, is correct. But, I mean, I think it's a big issue that needs to be addressed, you know, that can't be left unattended.
Mr. What, you had
So
started,
far, we've been unsuccessful, but,
you had started down a path.
well, and it was really, let's take a topic like transportation and sort of list the things that we think are important. I think the protection of the view shed off of Route 3 is important. I think that setting aside the 3 and 20 intersection, and let's just deal west of that for a moment. It should be designed in such a way that the local traffic is handled by the network within the project, that the access to 3 should be limited to 1 additional signalized intersection at somewhere near the post office now, I think, probably, along with maybe a couple of right-in, right-out situations. Those are fairly standard and not terribly intrusive.
Look, you right in, right out, more for gas, fast food, things like that, or what?
Well, it's just another way of handling the traffic if you're.
But it's more for convenience.
That's all.
Actually, you could use it for even a major thing as long as you got enough slowdown and acceleration.
It's got a deceleration lane and so forth. So that works, and that's not a huge impact.
But the point is that this still puts a lot of traffic on Route 3, that even going on down to the food line and that area down there. We have this transportation plan, and even though it goes beyond this, we need to be able to see something that takes that down towards Goodwin Drive.
And that's the area that I think that really needs the focus of some transportation planning, because a lot of the population is still gonna be on the other side of Route 3, be it Lake of the Woods or other developments that are underway. So that movement across 3 is to me is a critical. That's one of the reasons I was asking about the existing commercial. Unfortunately, that existing commercial development that's there isn't part of this application. It, as far as I know, is owned by lots of different landowners. It's not, even the ownership is different. I don't know how you bring that in the transportation planning process in such a way to make an improvement, but I think you have to be able to get from, let's just take Lake of the Woods, from Lake of the Woods onto this new parkway, which they call Gold something going.
And that may be going across Goodland Drive up to the.
It could be, but however that's done, that needs to be fairly efficient and be able to handle
Well,
it.
they've got their, the intersection, the recommended intersection in the transportation plan was, you go out to Lake of the Woods, turn right, come back, do a U-turn, and then go in.
That was VDOT's.
That's VDOT's.
Right.
I mean, that's,
So I think we have to work to include VDOT on both ends of this project, the 3 and 20 end, the Goodman Drive end as well.
because you're gonna want all the people down there in Wilderness Shores and Somerset Ridge, you want them to be able to get down to all of this area without having to come out on Route 3.
Exactly. That has to be the design.
Which is part of the design is for the existing A&K Boulevard to eventually connect in with Gold Mine Parkway.
That's great.
That, from day one, that has been part of the process, is that this parkway is to offload traffic from Route 3 and handle all local traffic. I could be totally mistaken, but I believe what is shown here are the known existing conditions to get phase 1, 1A, 1B underway. And as time moves on, like many other places, do the continuations and do the interconnectivity.
Well,
Mr.
it
Chair.
would seem that
if I
then
may.
that needs to be in the plan in terms of what the phases are. When this changes, when this.
They have no control over getting A&K Parkway down to their property. That is one of the problems.
Yeah, but you can't have a plan that's based on, well, this is gonna happen, but then at the same time, but we have no control over that, so we don't know if it ever will happen. And that's the problem I see with too much, I see this problem cropping up with this application on many fronts. There is this grand vision that's put out there that we're all supposed to fall in love with, but major parts of it are, well, we don't really know when that can happen or whether it ever will happen.
And that's why I think that the two ends of this parkway, whether there's one end somewhere close to 3 and 20 yet to be defined, and there's another end, at least at the moment, at Goodwin Drive. Those two ends have to be part of this plan, because at a minimum, the in-between points is where the development is gonna be.
So how do we deal with taking the Goodwin Drive end up to A&K Boulevard? How does that get, I mean, those are owned by different property owners?
Different applications.
Do we put that in the comprehensive plan so that any future use of that,
Well, it's in the
means
G.
nobody builds a school or a housing development over the top of it?
It's in the GWAP now. I think any future development, as
That's
you look back to the GWAP, and you see that other leg of the parkway. But we know that's not, there's no proposal in front of us to
do that.
do that.
We just need to make sure that the existing proposal matches that vision and
And there's at least a temporary access and egress.
there's a block at both ends
Right, exactly.
waiting to be developed.
And I think that's probably the largest transportation issue. I mean, there are issues internal to the project and in terms of distances and things like that. But from my standpoint, the biggest overall concern are the two ends of that parkway segment that is included in this application.
Well, that was specifically in the GWAP, it's saying utilize Route 3 corridor to limit access points.
It is a little difficult to see in this particular slide because I have the two together, but on the right-hand side, and we can I can get to a different version.
That
of this.
looks like the,
It's like a gateway study.
yeah.
So on the left-hand side, you have the overlay, as you remember, from the historic and cultural resources that were identified at the time. On the right-hand side, these are both exhibits basically at the end of the GWAP. And so they're the two kind of reference documents. The purple line, which again is hard to see here, I can get a different exhibit for it, is that routing of what we will call, in this case, Gold Mine Parkway, what has already been established on the other end is A&K Boulevard. So it has a bit of a circuitous route. You can see how it kind of bends and deflects back behind the residential development that's been already established there. And Mr. Mr. Chair, I did want to say, we received today the phasing plan from the applicant, and they did ask that at the appropriate time in this conversation to bring it forward. I think now is probably a good time to bring it forward. Okay. So, but I don't want to lose track of what you asked me to do too, which is to go through this line by line, because the next item is one that kind of relates to this intersecting transportation. So, got a little window that blocks part of my bottom right-hand corner, but what we're looking at here is a phasing plan over the period, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, over the period 2020 to 2060. So we're looking at a 40-year horizon for the development of this project, with the red and orange and yellow being phases 1, 2, and 3, green, blue, and purple 4, 5, and 6. Those phases are not given, even though it looks like 6 equal blocks, they're not given specific units of time. It's not a 5-year phase, 5-year phase, that doesn't track through. And so the idea of, again, as we talked about, is a massive project. It's being master planned to be developed over time by a series of developers over 40 years, frankly. I mean, you would not expect the same entities and individuals to be the same people developing it 40 years on. So what this does show is the phasing of transportation improvements. And remember, red, orange, yellow are 1, 2, 3. So this shows phase 1 with a red shape from, just to orient you, I have to remind you that in some of the documents we've received, north arrows are skewed in different directions. And I reminded the Planning Commission of this. So if things start to look east or west and it's hard to track, ask me, I'll do my best to orient you. But this is skewed kind of to the northeast. So as we're looking up Route 3 to the northeast, northwest, this has been turned. So it's Goodwin Drive. Again, it comes to a point basically at the food line, it stops. So what they're showing in phase 1, or the first block, is the creation of this circulatory system for what we're identifying as a potential development to relate to the town center. But it's shown with freestanding parcels, and it has the opportunity to be better related. And then in phase 2, in the orange, then it kind of rounds out that stub extension, the very first stub extension from Goodwin Drive. And then as we get into the green and blue phases, again, those are later and later still, we have the extension of Goodwin to the point where A&K Boulevard would be running through this area. So in terms of phasing and priming the pump or setting up the network structure in such a way that A&K could be built too, this is one way to change the phasing, is to look at building this too. I discussed this with the applicant. They understand that that is an objective that's in the plan. Again, there are some things that we're looking to the board to provide guidance on the policies that are adopted in the plan, like the reservoirs. They're shown on this property that may not be desirable in 2021, but were in 2013, 14, and 15. So I bring that forward related to the connections to the existing network system. So I can zoom in and zoom out and move around however you would like to on this.
I think a discussion of the reservoirs is something we need to address. Either we say no, or we say it needs to be set aside. And I think a lot of this comes down to what is it that we expect the entire Germanna Wilderness area to do. Our original discussion on that, we looked at maybe 6 million gallons a day at some point, which you can't get out of the Rapidan on a regular basis. You're going to need a reservoir. These two impoundments would give us maybe 50 days of water. And there were 3 other alternatives. When we did our water plan, there were like 5 alternatives for water. Several of them had 100 or 200 days supply. These 2 total only 50, and that was just alternatives. And so it isn't a driver, but if we really want to think about going beyond that, and we could give these up, which I don't think is a problem. But then at some point, if we want to go beyond just filling out sub-area 4 and maybe another few hundred, maybe another 1,000 homes along Route 3, we're pretty much, that's it.
Which I believe is probably all that we're going to get to in this time period. I don't believe anything back off of Flat Run Road. I don't see.
And we can leave that to our successors 3 or 4 times over.
Right, exactly. And one thing that there have been discussions back and forth through the whole process regarding who was going to provide the water and sewer. And it has been pretty well decided that
Sure.
RSA will be the provider. And at this point, either has in place or working plans in place to keep up with the demand and have surplus.
Yeah, and we have plans already to do that.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so in terms of supplying this development and maybe another 500 or 1,000 homes, we can probably do that. I think that we're gonna look and see whether we can get more than 3 million gallons a day out of the Rapidan. But other than that, that handles us for quite a long period of time.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good one, because I think we can button this one up quickly. There's a category of concern that we have that deals with water, sewer, utilities and things like that. I think the water and sewer, point to RSA, I think that we want to reemphasize that the utilities need to be all underground. And I think we want to add in that while construction is going on, that there ought to be some mainline fiber conduit or laid while that's being done. And there probably needs to be some clarification or some process that gets at the issue of what does the developer do and provide and maybe ultimately turn over to RSA and how that gets factored in the overall arrangement. So
But, I mean,
those are my,
if they follow their usual process, the developer says, okay, I want a 10-inch line here, because that'll provide my service. And if RSA says, well, we need it to go other places other than you, and we're gonna need a 12-inch line, RSA picks up the difference in price.
and I just think I think that's what we want. We want to say
But
that.
those are predominantly engineering decisions.
And that's what I think that should be our position, that there needs to be a collaboration between RSA and the project, RSA taking a broader, maybe even longer term view than just the project, to work out the details of sizing lines.
And such things as tanks, pump stations, all of that, those are pretty much engineering decisions as to what you need. You're gonna need one tall tank down there, whether you have 2 500,000 gallon tanks or a 1 million gallon tank, those are options to be considered. And, you know.
And I think in terms of water, sewer, utilities, that's sort of the list.
Okay, and with regard to the 2 impoundments in that area, I don't see any reason to force any kind of a set aside or anything on that. So those impoundments just go away.
Or looked at at a future date.
If they're still available. I don't think at this point
Well,
sounds like you're saying we
if
don't
we want to
need
look at it in a future day, we better make sure it's set aside. If we're saying that we don't need them at all, they can do whatever they want with that area.
If I may, Mr. Frame, and everyone, the locations of the reservoirs are fairly deep into the property because of the topography. And so we would be looking at years probably 2040 plus to get to that portion of it under this scheme, under this planning, phasing plan. So you're looking at reservoirs in at least 2040, probably beyond that.
Okay, so we're not talking about building roads through a reservoir or putting houses in the reservoir up until 2040?
No, well, that's at the early.
It's taken a piece out that truly does not need to be a concern.
I agree, I agree.
So, okay, and back to what Mr. White was saying, I believe that all of the utilities we need to address specifically as underground and everything put in initially, but basically a dig once type of policy for all of the utilities.
Okay. So we can come back to this exhibit. I had an outstanding question that prompted this, which is the extension of Goodwin Drive as shown here from those existing development areas into the new area. That would be the first phase. So as you can see, or at least as planned here in the red, this is the existing extension. what that looks like on the ground is, in their conceptual detail plan, these types of uses. So essentially, retail, office, banks, those kinds of services, with the town center being, in the orange, phase 2, or.
Well, here's, I hate to keep bouncing around because we've got a lot of ground to cover, but I'll switch to another subject that I'm particularly concerned about. In the G1 plan, we call for a fairly sizable parcel for either a corporate campus
Yes.
or industrial park or data centers or sort of an employment center. And as I recall,
Economic development.
economic development is a general category. The area that included was at least part, if not a substantial part, of what you were just showing.
Yes, so that's correct.
There and a little bit to the left, if not the west, whichever that is. And so I'm not sure I see that as being the retail.
It looks like it's retail.
I think that's an area, maybe even an area that needs to grow in size.
Well, and
That's an area
it doesn't need to be on Route 3 either, or even directly on the parkway.
It needs to be in proximity of the parkway, but it doesn't have to front it, I agree.
There is one other major thing here as far as infrastructure goes. I think it's the reason that a tremendous amount of this is up front is I think it's much closer to being taken care of, but at one time, there was no way to get sewer from other areas. So it was as much upon us as the developer that this had to be the development area. It was too costly by anybody's assessment to get anywhere else. And that is why so much was put into front-loading this the way that it's been front-loaded.
But there is some areas that are designated industrial currently, is that not right?
Yes.
And Kenny expressed to me like he felt there was at least 170 some acres that could be earmarked for that.
There is, and it's farther back, closer to the Bacalus Road area, I believe.
To the right side more.
If you will.
East side.
Well, I guess my point in bringing it up while we're talking about the parkway is that it could affect the alignment of that parkway to some extent, because you obviously want easy access, because if it truly is an employment center, there's gonna be a lot of flow, both pedestrian and hopefully as well as vehicles. And so that needs to be, if that becomes one of our priorities, and I think it should be, then we need to accommodate that within the transportation component, as well as just the land itself.
So Mr. Crowe, as you know, what I brought up here is the zoning map for the existing areas, and the kind of diagonal lines here show the I-2 zoning, the industrial zoning. We're at the same orientation as we were on the others, where Route 3 is.
Where is Bacalus Road?
Bacalus is.
Should be right, just down just a little bit, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not here because that
I
is.
think it's that blue line down there, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's the wilderness run.
Okay.
Let me get a little closer here, because I think this is.
Okay,
But
but
it's in this area, and I don't see it on this particular drawing.
Well, I'm a little bit less concerned about what today's zoning is as to when you create the master plan for this, there needs to be, at least in aggregate, if not a single area, there needs to be sufficient economic development, as Keith suggests, area, whatever that is.
This is Bacalus.
okay.
I really think that with our fiber capability and that this development could be a great hub for data centers.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't exist on the radar screen for us today, but could there's a high demand for it, and they're,
Especially dispersing it from existing locations.
and it's perfect for a live, work, play kind of environment. So just as an example, I think we need to provide the possibility to have that be part of this project.
I feel it's the same, just not earmarked for residential only.
One of the things that you'd mentioned earlier is that panel along Route 3, the existing trees,
The view shed, yeah.
that view shed. I know their comments came back when they were looking at it, say, well, they're okay with the Walmart setback. Saying, they would have enough berm so you can't see the parking lot, but you can still see the signs. I don't like that at all.
I guess I'm a little bit less concerned about the setback as to the screening and the vegetation and the berms and the strategic location of sign. I mean, they're gonna want some signs, there's no doubt about it, but you manage that.
A lot of this.
They were trying to use the Walmart as an example, and that's not the model that I would like to follow.
No, a lot of it comes down to the design standards for the structures as well. And, everybody uses the same one. Williamsburg. You can make things blend in, but
I think it's just another property owner, if somebody owns it.
the view shed is very important.
Three.
There's no question.
I had to call up and look it up again.
Mr. Treasurer, I have not gone through an analysis from start to finish down the Route 3 corridor, but as you all know, the topography changes. And so there are areas that are above grade and areas that are below grade, and areas that will be embanked, and areas that will not be embanked, berms that are present. And so the basic rough way to address it is to have a distance setback. But I would not recommend you that that's the only way to address it.
Oh, absolutely not, because for one thing, you take the trees that are there now, in 15 years, majority of those trees aren't gonna be there anymore, they're gonna be dead. And something that has been found over time and time again, and unfortunately, at the time, we thought it was best practice when Walmart went in, was, save all the trees that are there. Well, if you go down and look at the trees that were there, almost all of them are either gone or they're close to it now. The more important thing is to have setbacks, berming, and appropriate plantings for the screening. They're no different than these solar facilities. So many of them want to just take and plant some trees that in the fall and the winter, they don't hide anything. So that is much more important and appropriate anymore than just going with the standard design things.
How's that gonna be zoned?
When we talk about providing recreational access to the rabbit dam, I see one boat dock.
Well, and that's something we have to remember there is how far up City of Fredericksburg owns, because you can't do anything on their property. And then from there, actual ability to access the river. Because if you go down in Wilderness Shores, go down their path down to the river, anybody that's going to want to get to the river, they're gonna have to be really healthy to even get a canoe down there. Yeah, let alone back. So it is more topography challenging than anything else. Going back to basically the day that GWAP became envisioned, up at A&K's property or Western End.
Much better.
A much better place. So you can say, yes, we want access, unless you're gonna put inclinators in to get people up and down, you're not going to get the access.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
Yeah, that's
I mean, he's got a boat dock there, I think that's probably.
That's pretty darn good.
That's about all he's gonna get.
Right.
Just wanna make sure that that's.
Back to Mr. White, Mr. Marshall.
you have something you wanted to
Well,
Bring forth.
I think as I'm envisioning the output of this, God help Allison trying to put this together, but having stipulated that, there's probably, we talked about transportation as a big category. There's lots of things under there that we haven't discussed already. We talked about water, sewer, utilities as a category. I think there's a land use category at sort of almost the macro level, where when it comes to allocating the uses, there's open space uses, there's some residential uses, there's some honest to goodness mixed use pieces. I think there needs to be a piece within that mix that is that corporate campus or that industrial park or whatever, however we want to label it, that is significant in size and it can be fairly readily developed in terms of site prep requirements, because you want that to be phased in, at least to begin, fairly early in the project. I think the parkway needs to serve that parcel or parcels, whatever it happens to be. And so I would support a fairly strong requirement, suggestion, recommendation, however we end up doing it, that be given, more emphasis and more space, and be better defined, and reserved and preserved for that purpose.
What about making sure that the retail is primarily accessed by the Parkway instead of Route 3?
Well, I'm back to where I was. I think you have to. I think the flow from Goodwin to the Parkway, somehow back to 3 at some point. That's got to be how everything is oriented.
That's where the retail should be.
Retail, whether it's mixed use or standalone,
Yeah.
or even the multifamily residential needs to be focused toward that Parkway.
One of the things that came in the discussions that different people have sent us was the issue of low-cost housing. And we don't have an ordinance requiring low-cost housing, and I'm not sure that we're ready to do that. But one of the things that was also mentioned in some of the concerns was the fact that how much of any kind is open to determination by the developer after we've given them a total carte blanche as to what to do. And I don't necessarily, if they want to go to 4,751 houses, I don't think they need to come back to us. But I think there ought to be some limits on the economic range that they can use.
And a plus or minus of 5% or
Whatever, something like that that says that this is, that they can make those kind of decisions based on market conditions. And if they have to go beyond that, they do have to come back.
Because obviously the commercial component, you can look anywhere else, which we didn't want the sprawling commercial anyway, but look anywhere else, I mean, use Spotsylvania Mall. They've torn part of it down and it's now becoming housing. So there are adjustments that are going to have to be accommodated due to not just the local, but the national market standards.
Understand.
With all that being said, I'd like to go to Mr. White for a moment. He's really good at summation of bullets. I would like to get some rough thoughts because we can sit here for another 8 years discussing all the intricacies.
Not all of us.
What I'm saying is, I understand where a lot of the concerns are. I know a lot of the concerns that were there at the Planning Commission probably shouldn't have been there, but they were. So if we can get it focused back on the board's vision of this to move forward. The Planning Commission's having work session Thursday evening. Let them get some thoughts, and then we can move forward to an additional work session for us to gather more thoughts. But get our overarching right now to send back, so that Mr. Brooks and his people can have a little smaller elephant to chew on.
But let's take the land use. I mean, I think the GWAP plan itself did a fairly good job of defining that, and we would want to adhere basically to the construct that's there. The additional bullets, I think you would add, I think we should take the residential component and have the applicant define on a percentage basis or numbers or however it's best done, the fact that there will be apartments, and we need to know about the percentage of all residential or the numbers or whatever. I think it's not exactly low income housing, but it's
More
better.
affordable.
It's somewhat more affordable, assuming they're rental units. Same thing with whatever else, whether they're townhouses or maybe even some condominiums or duplexes. I think that needs to get defined because I think we do want to mix, because if you push, for example, for this corporate campus or employment center, we need employment houses or housing for the employees. And not every one of the employees is going to be a CEO level.
Somebody's got to clean sweep the floors.
And we have a shortage of that in the county generally, is from all the sources that I'm hearing. And so I think that allocation, that mix is something that's important for us. And I'm not in a position to give you the numbers, but I think we can define the categories. And I can see the vision is that as you get further away from the town center, the lots get bigger, the homes get bigger, the price tag gets bigger, and you're attracting a different slice or different demographic. And that's good for the development as well.
What about sequencing of commercial and residential?
Well, I think the very first pieces have to be the true mixed use, in parallel maybe with some others, but those true mixed use residential above retail kind of a setting. I think that's got to be in the earliest phases.
What is the developer's residential unit mark that they're currently setting?
I don't think they defined it.
Well, they were pretty close on it.
It is in the proffers. I don't remember the exact number, but it's
Well,
no more than 47,
Okay.
4750 or something like that.
That's one thing I would like to
What's
see
4750?
is,
I'm sorry, no more than 4,750 residential dwelling units, which could be, as Mr. White's saying at this point, any mix of.
Well, somewhere I saw some numbers and I wrote them down that
Sure.
they had detached single family were 43%.
Right.
And I assume this means of the residential units, the total units. Attached single family, which I take from townhouses, 27%, multifamily 20%, active adult 10. The missing component is the above retail residential piece. I don't know what that is. I didn't find a number for that.
with all of that, I think something that's very important that we do set is a total cap of residential units within there. And the reason that I say that is there's apparently what I would consider misinformation for the possibility of this ultimately having
Oh, 10,000, I heard 10,000.
20,000.
20,000, they used a density and applied it to the entire 2,600 acres. That's PEC's boogeyman.
So I think it's very important that we, coming out of the gate, that it is determined and recognized there is a cap.
With that in mind, what is the price point on these upper level houses? Where are we looking at?
It's not defined in the proffers.
Can you define it in the properties?
I mean, it can be defined within proffers, but remember on a 40-year horizon, I don't think that's something.
Well, I know, but I guess what I'm getting at is this point, and I asked Kenny, I said, where's your price range on your homes? And he kind of pushed it on up there around 600,000. I said, well, a large part of your clientele could be coming out of Northern Virginia, and they're not gonna sell their house for $1.5 million and come down here and wanna live in a $600,000 home. I feel you should have a certain number of houses in that 3/4 to $1.5 million, and maybe a smaller number even greater than that. And what that will do, not only, that will help improve your tax base, but you're probably not gonna be putting too many kids in your schools too.
Well, there's
People need to live too.
it would be, quite honestly, rather than a price point, you're going to be looking more at a combination of square footage and, for lack of me being able to think of a better term, an amenity level within the home. Because, one, what is this today, $1.5 million in Northern Virginia, could be $3 million next week.
That's what I'm getting at.
Same here, and one issue that we run into, and I know, is we currently have and this is on a federal level, basically a lending cap for Orange
I know
County that is much lower than others. So it makes it very difficult. So that's something that needs to be addressed, is that lending cap in order to bump it up.
But I would not just look at quantity, but the quality holds too.
Absolutely.
Maybe not for everything, but a certain segment.
Well, no, everything actually has it. In fact, in their design book, they have gone to the lengths to take the houses that are on corners as you turn into a street. They're actually upgraded to give you a better appearance as you go in.
And they have also, they're, I don't know that it's completed yet, but I know they're working on a fiscal impact analysis. And
They've got one here.
And in that, they have set a range for the houses, and the numbers I saw were, townhomes were, 280,000, 1,600 square feet. Single family starters went from the 310 up to about 435 according to this, and then the estate, the bigger ones are $500,000 and up. And then the same thing with apartments, they had 1 bedrooms and 2s and 3s, and so they have at least started down that path of defining some of the things we're talking about here.
Right, as close as they can, because if you look at some of these townhouses that were originally 160, they're starting in 300.
I'm just saying we need to reflect a little bit more on what's going on in Northern Virginia, because that's exactly what we're gonna be dealing with.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Marshall, did you get one of those? If you didn't, it's well reflected in there. It's exactly what you're asking and looking
We're
for.
gonna cut down on a few of the numbers, stiffen up on the property values.
But I think you might take some of that area and put it into the corporate campus or the industrial park or whatever we end up calling it.
Right.
Some of those areas.
Okay, so,
Yeah, they're looking at townhomes, 280, small lot, 310, conventional single family, about 400 of them from 365 to 435. Estate lots, 74 of them, 500K plus, and then rental apartments, like 260.
right, and quite honestly, they can throw that in the trash because,
You just told him that, so it's something else.
well, it's the closest thing, but the prices have gone up
I know, I'm just,
tremendously. I mean,
Well,
buying homes, they're starting at 400,000 now. I mean, what we're at
600 is
200,000.
gonna be the starter home pretty soon.
That's gonna be the start.
Allison, what do you have so far? Just real quick, what have you got? What areas
have we already decided, huh?
I have, under land uses, I have a housing category that I've just captured some of you all's thoughts on, defining the types of units, the range of units, allowing for a plus or minus, change in percentage, affordable housing and employer housing opportunities, sequencing of the commercial and residential development with the true mixed use coming first, incorporating residential above retail. That's what I have for the housing component.
Well, I have one other under land use that I think is important.
I also have a commercial category that,
I think there needs to be another category that they've somewhat provided for, which I'm calling public facilities. They show us a school site, I think it's called, or something like that, which may or may not ever be a school site, but I think there does need to be provision for public facilities, not just parks, but you know, who knows, there may be a fire station, a police station, there may be a school, there may be a community center. I don't know what all those public facility.
Those aspects, they were actually had asked and were waiting on responses from the county because the school site, apparently at the town hall, it was stated by members of the school board, it will be a middle or elementary school, absolutely not a high school. Yet when school staff was in the ARC meetings, they were saying, oh no, it's a high school. No, you've got to, this is where some of the issues are. I think I will say a public safety center, which can be fire rescue station, police station if it's ever desired, or sheriff's office ever desired, and any other county facility. I will not use the traditional term of library, but an electronics center.
Well, but it also could be, RSA needs some area to do whatever it is, pump stations, water tower, water tank. I mean, I just, there's a land use category that, the term I've always heard is just called public facility, that for public facility, it has lots of labels. We can't yet predict what those are gonna be.
Right.
But it needs to be available to the county and RSA.
Right.
For
Well,
whatever.
I mean, that's part of the engineering
Right,
decision.
and they are more than willing, and we can get it defined even better. They put all of these things in there, but they have not gotten enough feedback from us to know, because they have a regional park, community parks, and local parks.
Well, I think actually Jim is right. I think we just need to have it set aside as public use. Right. And we'll decide when we need it. But that's gonna need to be, I think, both the amount and also the location. We don't wanna be given a ravine as a place for
No.
a fire station.
No, in fact, I think they actually showed some of the public facilities.
Well, they showed the parks and they showed a park and they showed the school.
Right, and if you.
And I don't necessarily know that this far ahead, we need to even say it's gonna go right here, but we just need to make sure that it is
It's
a
covered,
buildable lot.
absolutely.
So the proffer statement that was made related to public uses include, there are a couple. One relates to the school site, and they're talking about a 20 to 25 acre school site. This is generally shown in this location. It is not cemented, and they understand, and they are representing that it is not cemented, that it would be moved, it would be approved at the county's time and choosing, and the same for the park.
The regional park, right.
Now, I did bring, I don't want to put it up just yet, but I did bring some examples from Southern Village in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is a master plan development that has a school site integrated in this mixed use area. And it's a walking school site. It's an elementary school, and it's a place where people come from that community to that school. One concern that, of course, you all have to deal with and think about is the tail back out into Route 3 during school peak arrival and departure times. And so this may not be a desirable location because of its tail either into the parkway and or into Route 3. And they have a similar consideration for, a police substation where people file paperwork or show up because it's a mixed use electronics facility that's different than a fire station where we would need that egress to be able to exit from the fire station. So,
But also, I can speak very well from experience from this. I'm from an area that they incorporated these elementary schools into the neighborhoods. Well, that's not done anymore
because it doesn't work. It causes all sorts of problems. So you can pick any point in time for locations, and I think Mr. Johnson's suggestion is the best, that we have these locations earmarked, but not in cement, because especially where there's more homeschooling now, when there's more virtual schooling, all of that's going to change. So I would absolutely agree with Mr. Johnson that we have to have these in there with assurances they're not going to be down in a ravine.
But they should go beyond just what they're showing now. Because
Yes, yes.
you know, RSA may well need something, we may need to.
Well,
They know they're going to.
they know they're gonna need another space for a,
Pump stations and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it depends on where we look at it in terms of how much further downstream. I mean, with the current planned addition to the water plant, we can handle this.
Right.
You know, and so what happens next? And, but somewhere along the line, the sewage plant is gonna require upgrade, but I think they can do it on site,
With some expansion.
with an expansion on the existing site. So really determines where we go beyond Wilderness Crossing as to whether we start talking about other spaces.
Right. Allison, where did I cut you off at?
Under housing, land use, housing, sequencing of the commercial and retail with the true mixed use coming first, incorporating residential, both retail units, and the desire to see a total cap on the residential units. And that's what I have as far as housing.
Can I put my 2 cents in?
Absolutely, Keith, that's what we're here.
I'm kind of new to all this, and I would really like to see all this development moved off of Route 3 quite a bit. Now, I'm gonna throw out the crazy idea. Here's the crazy idea. If we could move that off some.
I'm in favor of that.
I'm not so sure we should reroute Route 3 and use the current Route 3 as a service road. Take some of this traffic off of Lake of the Woods. I mean,
There was a study that came back
let me
probably
finish now.
40 years ago to do that.
It's, regardless of what you're gonna do, it's gonna cost a lot of money in transportation. And if you don't get it right, in 20 years, you're gonna spend 10x what you started with. So you've got all that vacant land.
Keith, there's one thing I have to interject though.
All right,
Look at the topography.
I did.
You know, as you move away from 3, it gets,
Challenging.
And what they did that a number of years, many years ago, they were going to have a new Route 3 that went somewhere in the vicinity of the Parkway. And so as a result, they zoned a lot of the area along Route 3 as commercial.
Right. You don't think you can move it off?
I think Route 3's got to stay Route 3, and we just got to protect it. And part of protecting it is what you.
More as a service road is what I'm getting at.
But what you said is putting more of that stuff on the Parkway and keeping it off of Route 3, I think is appropriate.
I'm not talking about redirecting it a great distance. Like I said, it's the crazy idea, but at the same time, you might have to look at it. That would give you a little bit more room to get access to this and back to Lake of the Woods, using the current Route 3.
Just getting one smart scale, very small smart scale project is almost impossible for this county.
But you're gonna be spending millions of dollars regardless.
We're gonna be spending billions of dollars.
That's all about just some transportation, millions.
You're gonna be spending billions to relocate Route 3. I'm not. Good thought process. If it's something that can work,
I
fantastic.
don't know.
I'm just trying to think of the
As it is, it's pretty much, you're just clustering up right through.
And that's, what, you know, we talked earlier about this being 4 square miles of land, and it is. But, you know, I doubt that a quarter of that is really usable for significant scale development. It's more,
It's like
that
it gets
if you,
spread out of a bunch of little fingers.
well, that's right, it gets more usable if you put, you know, 5 acre lots sitting on a edge of a ridge or something, you can do quite a bit of that. But you can't put, you know, a industrial complex anywhere. You can't create a 10 acre pad site in very many places, unfortunately. But you know what could work is if you move closer to the river, there may be a corridor for a new Route 3. You'd have to get, you know, fairly close to the river, I think, to do it.
Well, I was thinking moving it more several hundred yards versus,
I don't know if it gives you enough land, I mean, it might, but.
if you take it somewhere, starting at the post office, looping it back around. You're gonna spend a ton of money regardless. It's just maybe something you should visit. Now, I'm not saying that's a great idea. Like I said, it was the crazy idea, but
Okay.
you may wanna look at it.
All right, what
One
else?
of the other elements that Ted brought up was the idea of a CDA or something, not that is necessarily a part of the land use, but at some point, the funding to make all this happen, especially that parkway.
The developer has actually offered that up.
Okay, all right. I hadn't seen that.
Okay, I'll try to stay as positive on this portion as I can. The developer got thrown under the bus at the planning commission. The developer did not have the second ARC meeting results.
Oh.
Did not have.
All right.
That's why they had not resubmitted
Okay.
a lot of their stuff. So
What,
I think we hit a void area there that was beyond what the developer had control over. And
It's undeveloped.
I believe at this point, there's still many, many questions. But at this point, I think we actually should be closer to where we're supposed to be.
what about the design? What I see in terms of the pictures they're showing, looks like Central Park. I mean, it's just big open areas, big parking lots, big buildings. I don't see it as a neighborhood design. I see it as just more of, you know, standard commercial.
Okay, they do have a town center area.
Right here's the big problem.
Let's get back. What areas have we
I'm
not
not sure.
covered?
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about design standards.
Yeah.
I mean, we touched on it, but I think it's you know, between the GWAP itself and a little bit in the zoning ordinance, we sort of characterize the expectations, if you will, with respect to, we did not create a design standard manual or anything like that, but I think that we should be able to have, and there's a start, obviously, with this document. I mean, maybe this document needs to become part of the proffer or something, I don't know. But I do think that we need to have few, if any, surprises as to the materials, the designs, the orientations, the heights, you know, whatever all that list of design standard matters are, that we should be, that should be locked down pretty tightly by the time this is all done, such that other than maybe upside surprises, who knows, there could be a new material developed that is the most wonderful thing in the world, and so you use it. But there should be few, if any, downside surprises or confusion, if you will, about what the expectations are. I mean, you know, some of these examples that they have are a couple of them at least I'm familiar with. And boy, that would be wonderful if we would achieve that. But I think that's what we do want to achieve.
Well, like, the one they've got on page 18 here, if you look at that upper portion, it sort of looks like a, you know, it's sort of a modern town center, but it's still a town center. So you've got, you know, you've got walking, you've got street parking, you've got, you know, stuff on both sides. And you get to some of the others and they begin to look more like a, you know, big, large commercial development.
Well, and some of them are not necessarily the town center. They're, and I agree, this needs to be refined. And I think it needs to be adopted as one of the proffers that they adhere to.
There needs to be some body of information that defines the expectations when it comes to design standards and materials and the like. I think that's something that I don't propose that we try to work it out here today. That's
No
not what we
difference
can
in
do.
the Barbersville village area.
The overlay, right. Yeah, there needs to be, you know, fairly significant definition of that general category of things to include, you know, the when it comes to the site plans, the details, layout, orientation, materials, the designs, the facades, and the like, the landscaping, that whole big body of what your eyes tell you.
The town center, Josh, can you tell me how many acres that covers approximately?
Not right off, I can do an estimate. They may have defined that in their narrative.
A little more detail in the bricks, how far it extends.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really just that one block is all that's the town center. I think it's about 30 acres, but I'm not certain about that.
I'll go with your estimation if you've already.
Well,
Yeah, that's probably a reasonable guess.
I mean, we're throwing all kinds of things out. I think that's a mighty small town center. That's one of the chief selling points of this, is that there'll be a town center. And I understand that on a development of this size, they're gonna wanna have some big box stores in there somewhere. That's gonna be part. I understand that, but you have something this large and you're gonna set aside 30 acres for a town center. That's it's gonna be dwarfed by everything else. It's not gonna be. Yeah, and I think it's, you know, to Lee's point, I mean, we can worry about all the rules and regulations for the town center in terms of how that's gonna look, but if it's only 30 acres, you know, then what about the massive areas outside of that have the big box stuff? And you know, you're limited in what you can do with big box stores. I mean, you can do something with them. And you can make them, they're certainly better looking Walmarts or Lowe's or whatever, and there are worse looking ones, but
These need to be better.
they all need big parking lots. They need loading docks for tractor trailers to get up to them.
So just additional work on design standards, is that a good general area? Because I can assure you, the planning commission has a 45-minute work session. We're already at 2 hours.
One of the things that they talk about is clubhouse.
Wrap it up in 45 minutes, Tom.
No, sir, not compared to what I'm hearing here.
I suspect that the other planning commission members ought to watch this video.
I'm going to
They want to spend 2 hours.
Are you sure?
I don't know.
I'm going to encourage everybody. Please watch the board.
I'm looking at the community clubhouse. They talk about, community spaces. And I didn't see anything in their layout that showed where any of those might be. I mean, that's just, if they're going to do that, they have to be a little more specific
and saying, okay, this is a community space or something. I know they did plan on a homeowner, some form of a homeowners association.
Yes, and in fact.
That was good.
A couple of things with that. They will require all solid waste to be private and part of the HOA requirements.
And they should be able to deliver it to the landfill for no cost. Just like the town does. Doesn't the town picks up the residents' trash and gets to dump it at the landfill without a tipping fee. I think that's the case.
I think the residents of the town pay a fee for it.
They pay a fee to the town to pick it up, but I don't think there's a tipping.
Well, okay,
If
there has, we will look at that. We will look at what the recovery fees need to be.
I think it should be the same as whatever the town, if the town is actually paying tipping fees, then this group should pay them as well.
Right, we don't, one thing we have to make sure of is that this does not incur additional tax burden upon the existing residents of the county.
Well, if we want to make sure, then I just don't want to treat town residents different than this group. Or I don't want to see this group different than town residents.
Well, same as Lake of the Woods, it's a homeowners association,
That's
it's
right.
not a town. That's just my opinion,
Okay.
so, but yeah, we will
The
definitely.
homeowners association should pay for the pickup. Pay for all the trucks and private, sure, whoever does that.
Right. Okay,
Want to check on that.
yes, okay, gentlemen, anything else today?
That's sort of my list, I think, of everything we talked about.
No, I think I'm good. I'm just, my biggest concern is just to start off with transportation. Gotta get that right.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but VDOT is an interesting animal to work with, and quite honestly, so far has been one of the major roadblocks to many things.
Well, maybe one thing that we should do is have a work session and get Alan and the company and have somewhat the same conversation we had today about what our concerns are. I mean, I do think Mark makes a good point that there's an association between this project and Route 3 and what happens with Route 3, but, you know, we're not gonna be able to wait on the answers about Route 3 to deal with this application.
No,
So,
that's,
but we need to do both.
But I think we need a recommendation from the VDOT as to what their recommendations are. I don't want to,
well, so far, the recommendations we've gotten from VDOT is no additional traffic lights. Nothing else. They want traffic to move on Route 3.
well,
Which, I agree, traffic needs to move on Route 3, but we also need to make sure that to access any locations, we have safe capabilities for that.
I did have another note that I think actually Mark raised, and I didn't see it at the time, but I remember thinking. One of the things that I think could be important is to somehow plan for a potential expansion to the town center area itself. There may be a second phase, if you will, that is to that would expand. I mean, if the town center is as successful as some are, you're gonna have a high demand for not only retail, things like restaurants, et
but the
cetera,
apartments there.
but the apartments there, absolutely. Because, and so it seemed to me that, and I don't know which direction it would go in, but I think it would be smart to have a phased plan for the town center to, you know, go another 50% in size or whatever the number is, I don't know. It just, I think that needs to be something that we flag and.
I think my biggest problem with this concept is it looks like something that I drew up.
That is a scary thought.
I mean,
I would like
to me, they need to be more creative in how they're putting this thing together, rather than just slap stuff down on Route 3 and then kind of build back from there.
Well, I think I agree with that. If you go to the detail of what the houses look like, what the buildings look like, what the facades look like, it looks, I mean, there's some really nice stuff there. I'm more concerned about that picture.
Yeah.
The master plan of the land use is, and I know they're working around a lot of undevelopable areas, either they're not true wetlands, but God almighty, they would be, the site prep would be just awful. I get that part. But I still think there's room to do what you're talking about, which is, you know, assume a very successful mixed use kind of community. You're gonna want more of it. This does not allow for more of it.
So may I ask one clarifying question? This was memo page 4, the second item about clustered businesses in the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan. The statement for a desired future condition is clustered businesses located in both intensive planned and traditional commercial developments around the future alignment of the Constitution Highway Route 20 and Germanna Highway Route 3 intersection. And the reason I ask that is it's just not addressed. Planning Commission is lacking some policy guidance on that. And in that area, if this is where it were to be realigned, which whether that's absolutely true or not, this would be that intersection. And this is the apartments, in this iteration, this is where apartments are shown. And again, that kind of transector movement from apartments to townhomes to assisted living facility, to the outer edges of the larger retail boxes to the town center where it's more street level and mixed. And then again, that breakaway through a good one in the existing commercial. One way to address that is just through form-based zoning essentially, and say, you know, your building shall be in this form with these dimensions and have these kinds of windows and doors and parking, and that's how they work. That's how they work, and you're silent on the use, which they are intending to be. I mean, they're proposed to be silent on use. So the question though is this building type an appropriate building type consistent with the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan in the area for the mixed use development? So the large box here. Likewise, again, very specifically called out within the Germanna Wilderness Plan is to have commercial development around this interchange. And so if that's a policy decision that needs to be revisited, you all are the ones to revisit it, and we will, you know, come to you and suggest some changes to update the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan.
I think that was talking about, Josh, I think that was talking about the other side of 3, the stuff that's already there.
The conglomeration.
That conglomeration of fast food,
Okay.
gas,
So the
a
read.
little strip mall, shopping center, car lot. What else is there, Lee? You see it every day.
So the
He doesn't.
We were just saying it's there.
So the future realignment referred to in the plan is talking about the current location, a little realignment within that intersecting area. Okay, thank you very much.
And I think we ought to check with VDOT and to see how much they would have a problem with extending 70 to the new Gold Mine Parkway, the existing Route 20 into the Gold Mine Parkway. I know that's a screwed up intersection already, but that, I would hate to create another access to their area based on a redirection or rerouting 20 that'll never happen, and then be stuck with that. Because if they feel that they can't do it at the existing and have to go to the new, then maybe VDOT ought to come up with some money to pay for the new.
Or give us a schedule when they would do
when
it.
they could, yeah.
I mean, I think a work session with VDOT is absolutely
And,
critical.
can we do it at our next meeting?
And then also, you know, what I'm trying to say is when you're moving Route 3, basically you're adding 2 more lanes next door to it and using your current left side more as a service road to get Lake of the Woods down and over. That's just a thought.
I don't want to see a service road. A
Well,
service road to
already
me
got
is
those
one that's
businesses on that
50
road.
feet off of Route 3. That's a service road. Parkway, we called it something separate, so it was not just an adjacent to Route 3.
It's a discussion to have with VDOT to see what's even in a realm of possibility with them.
And let VDOT let Alan bring his cohorts.
Right, I know statewide, what VDOT does not want to do is create additional lanes. That's why they've gone to these innovative intersections, is because what they have found, and everybody's always known, build and they will come. You know, look at 95. They have to just keep building more lanes. It does no good. That was one of their main statements. It's one of their main statements when they deal with VACO is we are more interested in innovative transportation methods rather than expansion.
Well, and so this should be right up their alley.
Yeah.
Because we've got a mess there.
Yep.
So we need to innovate.
And the fact that we have a proposal called Gold Mine Parkway as a basis for taking traffic off of Route 3, they ought to be able to maybe help out.
They should be. All right, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, I know Josh got the floor, because I have 10 seconds of it. So what's the direction you want the planning commission to go, and what's your priority? Because honestly, what I'm hearing here is some of the same concerns we had at our meeting, some of the same apprehensions, and some of the same ideas. It is hard.
And you guys did a good job of identifying many of those.
Yeah, and it's just kind of hard to run a direction for them. And we're going to meet Thursday for 45 minutes. I can see now that's a waste of my time.
No,
Because
it's
it's not
not.
gonna be there.
Even if it's nothing more than an informational session for the rest of the planning commission.
Okay. I'm just trying to get some guidance here.
Allison is tasked with putting together some bullet points.
Well, bless her heart.
And-
I've been writing the whole time we've been here. She's going to press the devil out of me.
I hope there's a video.
From those bullet points, it should give the planning commission a little better idea of how screwed up we are and what direction they need to go.
So, and the next thing, is there a timeline on this project? I mean, I heard at first it was urgency, but now it seems like it. Beg your pardon?
Well, technically, it's a year from application that we have to do something.
Okay, and the application was back in March, correct?
So we don't have a whole lot of time here for a lot of things. That's the only reason I was trying. I'm just trying to get some guidance.
We want to, go ahead.
Just to, what I think could happen next is, I'm assuming Allison will have something summarized here fairly shortly.
High level.
High level, that I think the planning commission can take whatever that is and either add to it or ask questions about it. You know, Josh will be there, Mark will be there, and sort of get on somewhat the same kind of discussion that we had. Then I think staff needs to go back to the applicant with that package of information and figure out, you know, how to get new information or change things or recreate things, whatever. I mean, I think what we will end up doing is passing our comments, including the planning commissions, once again, back to the applicant. And then I think Josh can work with them to sort of fill in the spaces a little bit about what we need to see in the way of revisions or additional information or responses to questions, whatever.
So I was asked to ask this question by a commissioner. Would a joint meeting cause the expeditiousness of this wheel to speed up if we had a meeting with
I
the
was
two
just getting ready
and
to
then push
say,
forward, because then you wouldn't have to wait till we met, you got it, it's a joint meeting. It's a big project, it's a 50-year project. I don't think anybody has tackled it like we're trying to tackle it, and it'd be fair to everybody to kind of have an exposure of everybody.
and what I was going to say is when Josh gets that back to the applicants, hopefully they'll respond rather quickly. And we can then have a joint meeting,
Okay,
joint work session
okay,
to discuss it and get some more of this out.
thank you, sorry for the
Because
interruption.
we definitely need to have it.
Sorry for the interruption, I just want some guidance.
Well, thank you for actually sitting through this now.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Chair. We don't often have the joint chairs in the room.
A lot of power in this room.
That's right. So it's a great opportunity. It is a great opportunity to ask for clarification on timeline. So as it relates to the work session that is scheduled for the planning commission on Thursday, that will be held. We are having a meeting tomorrow with the applicant to discuss your policy guidance that came out of today's discussion, your questions that came out of today's discussion, your ideas that came out of today's work session. So that gets the two bodies to get to a point where this information is being related both by video. Mr. Brooks, any thoughts that come from the applicant tomorrow that are verbal just to me, because I'm the person on that call, that I can translate in my introductory remarks on Thursday, which will be brief, frankly, and followed by the applicant's presentation, which is also intended to be summary and brief. So there can be as much time for
On Thursday?
Correct. So there can be as much time.
I gave them 15 minutes.
I suggested 10 to 12, but
But
the point of all that is.
when we will have our joint meeting.
I hope they are. I'm disappointed they're not here.
We will give you a timeline.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, you want me to summarize the points from today? Would you like me to circulate them?
To the whole board, just
Okay.
to make sure that we've covered them.
And then
And
I'll forward them in writing to Josh for provision to.
And to Mr. Brooks, yes.
Right.
Any other questions, concerns? Mr. Ledger?
One thing I will add is if time becomes an issue, any extensions the applicant requests, extend that year, and it may come to the point where the applicant needs to request.
And the 1 year starts actually when they get to the hearing on the board level, correct?
For that regular fiscal year.
No, it's from the application process.
Application process.
Different places handle it differently.
Yeah, the planning commission technically has 120 days from when they first get it on their agenda.
All right, very good. We're adjourned.
I didn't hear much.